big problem.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 29 of the Ape and Bird NFT show. That was the voice of one of our special guests we've got here who didn't understand the concept of the countdown timer, and also the concept that Steve and I never edit and post-produce these episodes. They're all raw, so we're rolling straight through today. But I am very privileged to have two guests with me today. As I mentioned, last week, I should say, on our first show back for 2023, Steve is unavailable currently. He's eager to get back when he can. But for now, we're going to bring on a few guests each week, and I'm going to introduce those guests right now. So starting off with the co-founder of NFT Melbourne, which is an event that I mentioned last week on the show. We have the co-founder here, Marka, but also Marka is the founder and project lead of Checkers, which is a game that he launched a few weekends ago that we're going to deep dive into today. So welcome, Marka. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Greg. I don't know if you would have cut out for everyone there, but you literally cut out for me for about 10 seconds there. So
yeah, you got wrong.
That is okay. That is the gift and the curse of Riverside. It takes up a lot of bandwidth of my slowly dying laptop, as Steve knows. We had a few incidents like this last year. But the good thing is Riverside records everything locally. So on our recording, we'll be all good. But yeah, thanks for joining us, Mark. Looking forward to getting into a number of topics with you today. And then secondly, we have somewhat of a familiar name, maybe not a familiar face if you're watching on the YouTube version, but similar to superstars in their respective realms, Messi, Madonna, Beyonce, and we have Boot. Just goes by Boot. So one of Web3's cultural icons. Thanks for joining us, Boot.
That's right, and you can see that I didn't shave for the occasion. I've prepared very little material. But as I was saying at the start before I was interrupted by the countdown, I have put my phone away to focus on this illustrious podcast, and I'm very delighted to be a guest here today.
Yes, and throwback to our listeners when I think it took me at least 10 episodes to actually get a mic when we launched this thing. So Boot's voice might be a little bit lower today. I don't think he's rolling with a microphone, but make sure you're tuning in nice and tightly to Boot, because alpha will be dropped, is what I'm hearing. So first topic of the day, we wanted to just talk a little bit about 12-Fold, which is the art mint that finished up yesterday at auction on BTC by Yuga Labs. This got a lot of attention in the last sort of week or two when they announced it. Guys, I think we had the top sale of something like 7.11 BTC for the number one, or the most desirable piece. We had an average sale of 2.55 BTC and a minimum of 2.25, and Yuga raked in 16 million. Marka, any thoughts on Yuga's latest foray into the art scene?
Well, yeah, obviously they've done it again, right? Everything they touch seems to turn to gold. $16 million for a drop is pretty incredible. The art is subjective, like all art, I guess. I've seen it, the little blobs. It's funny, a few weeks ago we all heard about NFTs going on Bitcoin, and there was a lot of FUD and whatever else. And I don't know, I just, as again, the bankless guys say, any block space demand is good demand, right? And I personally have never really, I bought a little bit of Bitcoin back in the day, but I've never really used Bitcoin, right? So for me, I think it's great to see it being used. And yeah, fair play to Yuga for doing what sounds like a great drop. I know there was, they did interesting things where you had to like deposit your Ethereum to them, and then if you lost, they would return it, which was sort of a bit of a Web 2 way of doing things. But it sounds like they returned everything straight away. And it sounds like it went off without a hitch in terms of it all. And I think they're manually inscribing each one over time, so it's definitely it's almost like they've taken a couple of steps back, right, with these NFTs and Bitcoin. But I like it, and when you hear something and you go, that sounds a bit odd, you probably should look into it more, because there's been a lot of incredible flips, right? The ordinal punks or Bitcoin punks, or whatever you call them, are selling for crazy amounts. So yeah, hats off to Yuga for getting in and making $16 million.
Absolutely. Boot on brand or off brand for Yuga?
I think they were always going to do something like this because it speaks to their like holder base. Well, some of their holder base, which is rich art collectors, right? And BTC, limited amount of collection, kind of Fidenza-esque. Like if you're on Twitter, you know the niche, you know who's buying this, and like they don't care about anything other than it's Yuga and it's exclusive. So I think that it makes perfect sense for them to do it. Like you can call it a cash grab, maybe, but then like they already have so much money, so it's like why not play in this kind of more traditional art ecosystem and pivot what they're doing away from the apes. I mean, they look pretty cool. I don't think you need to think anything other than they have the clientele to buy this, so they did it, and that's pretty much where it starts and ends. I mean, but great to make $16 million if you could. Yeah.
I think one of the thoughts I had earlier today, I mean, I'm sort of agnostic to them doing this, but ultimately when they acquired Punks and Meebits, remember that was sort of the talk of the town. Was that last year from memory? I can't remember if it was late 2021 or early 2022. We'll have to look into that. But autoglyphs weren't part of that. Right, so Lava Labs actually did hang on to onto the autoglyphs collection. So to me, I felt like maybe this was a way for them to sort of almost plug that hole where, I don't know whether autoglyphs was ever on the table, and these are not autoglyphs. But ultimately, it's sort of a thought that I had today, just around 12-fold. But moving on, last week, and I don't want to spend as much time on Proof and Moonbirds as I did last week, but I thought it was important for our listeners. I got some good feedback on, as someone that's got, fairly decent investment into the Proof ecosystem. It was a horrendous February, lots of fumbles, an incredible amount of fumbles, and I gave a pretty honest and raw take of me as a holder last week, and some of the observations I had. I wanted to do that on Thursday afternoon last week. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, I should say now, on the 8th of March, because I knew that the announcement of their Q1 update with Kevin and Justin was coming on Friday morning Australian time. Now that update, what's the line, sort of buy the rumor, sell the news. That rang true again for Moonbirds. We've seen the floor probably move down almost a full ETH. Oddities have been hit too. Oddities are down probably from about 1.1 to about 0.75, 0.7 at the moment. Ultimately, the TLDR was Kevin and Justin and the Proof team are now saying that the vision for Moonbirds is it's a PFP for art collectors and art enthusiasts. Now, I still feel like I don't have a full opinion on this yet. I'm still sort of digesting, but ultimately I sort of asked the question, well, what was the plan in the beginning, right? And I'm not sure there was a plan. And that's probably something that I've been reconciling since the announcement on Friday. I think they actually did a reasonable job of steering the ship in a direction that at least a strong majority, or at least some of the majority, can get behind. I know a lot of people have sold because they've just said, I'm not an art collector. I'm not that interested in art. So like Moonbirds is not for me. And a lot of people have been underwater and they've just taken the loss and they've moved on. But I spent a lot of time last week talking about the Proof Pass that's floor was just cratered in February because of, the communication. And it did feel like, there could have been a soft landing, but unfortunately, the hard landing, predominantly delivered by Kevin, was what we got, and the market responded accordingly. But with Moonbirds, I do think, I go back, and Kevin and Justin did almost first 45 minutes of this video was, let us take you back in time. And I mean, I was walking down memory lane too, because I can remember, and I know Marco, I know you've told me a few times you were so dirty that you missed that Proof Pass mint in December 2021. But, they did a good job of going back in time and explaining things. But I think you could definitely make the argument that a lot of people that bought Moonbirds really thought this was the challenger to Yuga, right? And I know, Marco, again, I'm going to throw to you in a second. You've had thoughts on Yuga being, somewhat of a monopoly, right? And having all these great collections and I think a lot of people probably saw Proof as the up-and-comer and the somewhat of an underdog, along with other collections like Doodles and maybe CloneX and Artifact as well. But the Proof Pass was popping off. Moonbirds had sort of, mooned in the beginning, and Kevin had made statements like, we're going to do this thing nesting. And, one of the things that didn't sit well with me is if, with ApeCoin, if you had an ape the night before ApeCoin claim versus someone that had minted and held on for, a long, long time, you got the same amount of allocation of ApeCoin. And he was essentially, leading down the path of a Proof coin or a Moonbird coin is coming at some point, and we are going to reward day one nesters, people that have been there from the beginning with us. And I think a lot of people, I know I'm speaking a little bit here, but they're actually going to ditch nesting after the Diamond Nest. So one of the announcements on Friday was when you get to Diamond Nest, it's going to be like, I think they sort of used confusing wording. This is going to be an art exhibition, but what they're actually saying is Moonbird holders are going to have the opportunity, almost like a Grails type of drop. It's going to be a little bit different dynamic, but essentially you're going to get access to like a free mint of art, right? And Terrell Jones is the first artist that they've announced, and we're going to talk a little bit about Terrell in a second on another topic. But ultimately, I think what they've done is they've doubled down on the thing that they have done well previously, and that's the Grails project.
Yep.
That's being somewhat of a leader in curation and a leader in media around digital art and NFT art. But I think it's just a really interesting one where, Kevin was saying a lot of things before the Moonbirds mint. We're aiming to be a top PFP, top 3 PFP project. He was bullish on the coin. He was talking about High Rise, their quote unquote metaverse they were going to build. That has now been scrapped. They went into detail on Friday of why they weren't going to do that. But ultimately, it feels to me like they've pulled a lot of things back. Now, I sort of have a few thoughts here. It's like there's a disappointment to say the expectations of what people were buying in at and what we thought was coming down the line and we thought was going to be somewhat of a Yuga competitor potentially. That feels like it's had cold water tipped all over it. On the more positive, optimistic side, and this is the part I haven't quite got to yet, because I do feel like I've been burnt a little bit, and probably some of that is my own regret of not selling the Proof Pass anywhere remotely near the top and then, say, buying back in like a few of my friends had done. But ultimately, I wonder if maybe this is a good thing long term, because I think we are going to, and I think, Boot, you'll probably have some thoughts here. I think we're going to see a lot of projects, even some of the projects that we're, have been rolling off the tip of our tongue for the last 12 to 18 months. I think we're going to see a lot of those rug or slowly rug over the next 6 to 12 months. And I wonder if this pivot by Proof is short-term pain for long-term gain. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit of hopium in me. I've done a lot of talking, but Marco, do you want to give us sort of your outsider thoughts on that?
Yeah. Where do I start? I watched the Kevin Rose podcast when he announced the Proof NFT, and unfortunately I was flying back to Ireland and I missed the mint. I was ready to go, and since then I've almost, when you miss something, you just sort of ignore it. But it's been hard to ignore Moonbirds and Proof and Grails and everything that's happened, and obviously then all the good and bad news. Listen, I think one thing is, there was a lot of talk and there was a lot of promises, and I think everyone was trying to run that hype train last year, going, hey, we're going to do a token, hey, we're going to do a metaverse. And not that I've been involved in a lot of projects, but that's the one thing is you got to be careful what you say, right? Like, don't under promise and over deliver. And that's almost, again, what Yuga have done, right? They haven't really done a lot of promises. And when they've said, hey, we're going to do a metaverse, they've gone and produced, it's just a little demo, but they've produced it. So I think that's their first issue, is that they talk too much really about, certain plans there. Our friend Secure D on Twitter did a really interesting post this morning, actually, which piqued my interest in Moonbirds. And he's basically saying that, Moonbirds will be the access pass to this Proof ecosystem in terms of artwork. And he's sort of saying that Proof can become almost like a modern museum of digital arts, because, they've got access to those artists. They've got our friends at Divergence, who are some of the best in the team at smart contracts. And they know what they're doing there, right? And maybe it's pissed off some PFP owners, but it does seem to be their strength. Like Rails smashed it out of the park. Like I was so jealous when you minted yours, Greg, and so yeah, I think it's a good move. You're never going to keep everyone happy, right, with these changes in roadmaps or whatever else, but it does seem like they're honing in on their strengths. And yeah, if you are into art, whether you're actually into the art or you realize, hey, when I explain NFTs to people who've got no idea, I played golf on Monday actually, and someone asked me, and I was like, I do bring it back to art a lot because digital art is here. These young artists like Favocious and stuff, all they do is digital art. They don't use canvas hardly at all anymore. And then to sell that digital art, crypto's there, right? And that's basically what one iteration of NFTs. So I think digital art is only going to grow exponentially, and if Moonbirds can align with that, then it's good for their collectors who both love art and potentially those who are more speculative flippers. So I think it's a good move.
Absolutely. Boot, got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that like what's happening with Moonbirds and Proof is not unique to them. It's what's happening in the ecosystem, in that there was this big narrative around value, like especially last year, start of last year, sort of still the bull run, but declining bull run, right? Where everybody's trying to buy the next Yuga, like the next ape. Everybody's trying to invest in like a product ecosystem, and they're just, and Proof looks like it has all of these things on paper. Moonbirds looks like it's got everything, but in reality, all of those projects just can't deliver, right? They look at the floor price of Moonbirds, of Doodles, of CloneX, like all of it's down because it's just hype. And like the only, like Yuga is winning because Yuga was already winning, and there's only so much liquidity in this space that, like, yeah, sure, you can try and take them on, but like, I mean, at this point, no one can, and no one's going to, unless like some huge brand enters the ecosystem and makes another play. But I really think it's because the product meta is dead, and those blue chips are going to keep bleeding over time. I think a few of them will stable out. Like Azuki has kind of found its stability for some reason.
Yep.
I don't know why that project, the one actually founded by a rugger, is the most stable.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And then, so, I mean, but Suzuki's like, they haven't promised too much either. They've done
some good things, right? The developers, it's Seagar, isn't it, that brought out the ERC-72A? That was pretty innovative. They did the skateboard, obviously, with the physical chip sort of thing. So, and I think they've just taken that anime artwork PFP over as well. So, but again, I'm surprised. That could have been one of a handful of projects that did that, but they did.
And that's having success, I think, basically by going outside of making too many promises and just keeping a fan base. I think, Proof is like doing like a lot of good stuff at the time. It sounded good, but it's so hard to deliver on that. And even if they did deliver on it, I mean, it doesn't matter. The floor would still be down. So there's just so much pressure on these projects to keep going. And I think in the next 6 to 12 months, I mean, we probably won't even be talking about half of these projects anymore. Like, it's really going to thin out the pack. And there's going to be some new rising stars in some completely other way that we think. But the past meta is long gone.
Yeah, and then you see... Sorry, Greg. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm an artifact owner. It was, I'm a CloneX, or I was a CloneX PFP until recently. And you just look at all the FUD they're getting, right? And I was personally pretty upset because they did that where you can order the crypto kicks, but they never announced that it wasn't going to be shipping to Australia. And like, they basically let hundreds of secondary sales go. But they've just copped so much FUD again because people thought they're going to be the next Yuga, or as good as Yuga, and they haven't really done too much wrong. A little bit of bad communication, but their videos, like their websites, their everything is pretty incredible. But no one can compete with Yuga, which I have to say, like, this is all about decentralization, and it's not any shade on Yuga. I do worry just about the power Yuga have. Like, my one and only goal in life in NFT world is to get a CryptoPunk, and they have CryptoPunks. They have, of the top 10 projects they own or are involved with, something like 6 or 7 of them, right? Like, and it's a risk. It has to be a risk. Like, they've got so much power that,
Yeah.
they've done nothing wrong so far. But if they did, and if something came out, like we never thought FTX was bad, right? But I do worry about the amount of power they have in all of those projects in terms of Yuga. So
yeah. I had that conversation, Marco, with some guys who like are a few network brackets above us, and they were like, it doesn't matter, right? Because people will keep buying everything that Yuga put out because like they're the brand in the space. So I think they're always going to have that like rich person's liquidity to go into them. Like the average punter is probably not able to enter the ecosystem apart from in a few areas. So I think that's always going to be there. I don't think there's anything that's going to blow them up. Like unless ApeCoin somehow becomes secure, like, have to be some regulatory outside intervention.
Yeah.
But like at this point, I think if you're a betting person in the market, you should buy into projects that you think that Yuga will acquire, because that's when that becomes valid and it's going to moon, and that's like, it seems like a safe investment choice, like to shop around and think, oh, well, who might they be buying? Like, what's another project that could be acquired by them? Because ultimately, as the year goes on, that they still have the money, and a lot of these projects still have a fan base, so it might make sense for them to start like scooping some of these up for bargains.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things you mentioned before, Marco, is and Steve and I had talked about this probably on multiple episodes last year, was I think the Proof team, and we obviously know Harry and Aaron, and I'm quite close with a few of the moderators and a few of their other staff there, and they do have a great team, and I feel like they're one of the more genuine, authentic, teams in the NFT space. But we had spoke about the contrast of Yuga with their sort of scissor reels and like anticipation and just sort of like short and sharp, almost under communicating, but building suspense for the NFT space. And Justin and Kevin, in particular, like almost over communicators, right? And I feel like Kevin, having sort of spent a lot of time digitally with him, in Discords, and I interviewed him at NFT Fest and all that kind of stuff. Like he does, just getting a WhatsApp barrage here, I'm going to mute. But he does have a tendency to just sort of sprout stuff out, right? And I don't think he means any malice by it, but he gets excited and he's like, oh, if you have the space helmet with the Moonbird, like, I know Elon Musk, so, you do a tour of SpaceX, and like, so people do take that as like, oh, well, that's coming, and when is that coming? And one of the things that they did do, they actually did airdrop some tokens for hoodie owners of Moonbird. So I've got a hoodie on its way, as well as they've got a drop for nude birds. So essentially the birds with no attributes, which Secure has, Marcus. So he'll be getting something as well. But I think they also said, we'll get off Proof in about 2 minutes. But the other thing that I failed to mention off the top was, for the Proof Collective, they probably injected a little bit of oxygen back into the Proof Pass, in the sense that up until last Friday, it was almost like this thing's sunsetting after 3 years. And like, we're not even halfway there yet. But as I spoke about on the show last week, the market responded with, well, this is a depreciating asset. So like, we're not going to touch it, or we're going to let it fall for a lot longer. What Kevin did say is the Proof Pass will continue to deliver the benefits that it always said it would in the 3 years. There's 5 more grails to come in the next 2 years, as well as a bunch of other art drops and a few other bits and pieces. But ultimately, the pass will turn into what they're calling, as a working title right now, as Moonbird Elders. And so essentially it'll be like 1,000 tokens that will be, dare I say it, I'm probably going to upset some Moonbird holders here, of which I still am myself, but probably like a slightly elevated tier of Moonbirds. And that elevated tier, it's a little bit gray area at the moment, but they've essentially said that they will have benefits and perks slightly over and above the normal Moonbird, right? So there might be like a special
two fanny packs that they're going to get, and 2 pairs of socks.
Well, for the sake of my own bags, Boot, I would say it's just going to be an airdrop every week with a 1 ETH floor. Not financial advice, obviously. This is
$24
it's never.
value. 12 that
never
they handed out. Yeah.
It's never financial advice here. So yeah, I think I think overall it was a good announcement on Friday. Whether people liked it or not, going in that art direction, as Marco mentioned, they're sort of doubling down on what their strengths have been to date, and I think that at least there's a direction now to go. Whether people like that direction or not is obviously a different question, but that's enough on moonbirds, but let's stay on the theme of owls. Did you guys see these little owls run up on the weekend from a free mint to nearly a 0.4 floor? Did you fade generational wealth is what I want to know.
Yes, I completely did.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be on the show right now if I had a Jenny wealth.
Yeah, we'd be pina coladas on the
more
beach.
Important people. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's Boots' first stinger for the show.
I think I am. When did it happen here? Was it our time Sunday and then
Saturday? Yeah,
our time Saturday. Yeah. So I pretty much had a day off Twitter on Sunday, and I think I logged on Monday, and I just saw owls, and I actually thought it was something to do with moonbirds. Initially, just thinking it, right, and then I was like, "Hang on, is this a checks related thing?" But yeah, it was just a simple ASCII art, which is text-based art that free minted and then just went crazy, right? But there's one of these every week, and for every one of them, there's 1,000 that are just go nowhere, right? So it's just a game of lottery. You can be on there, you can waste all your time trying to look into crypto Twitter and follow these things, but I don't think it was anything special. It just caught the wave, right? A few people minted, and unfortunately, there's a lot of suspect stuff that goes on with those type of mints as well, right? Like they'll free mint it, and then they will have bots that will just buy and sell, and get the other bots to attract it, and then it goes crazy. And obviously Blur with the with their trading, with their people trying to get their points on that, has been a factor in it as well. So and I'm sure it's the sort of thing where it's already down probably 80% from the highs, right, from where it was on Sunday.
Yeah, I would say so. So I saw it actually. I was about to go for a walk on Saturday, and I still did go for that walk, and it was an expensive walk. I saw these things because I think I was on OpenSea just checking something else out, and I saw them for like 0.02 or 0.025. So I don't know what that was. It was probably like $30-$40, something like that. And I was like, a lot of proof FUD, Moonbirds FUD. There's a meta here. There's a meme value here. Yeah. And I texted a few buddies of mine, Aussie proof holders, and I said, have you guys seen the owls? Nah. And one of them said, shout out to Dan Cube, said, free mint, no way, not touching it. Actually, no, I apologize. I apologize. I didn't text those guys until it was 0.1 because I went out for a walk. I faded it at 0.025 and I came back and it was 0.1. And I texted the guys and said, did anyone get it? And at that point, one of them said, no, 0.1 free mint, nah. And I still felt like this is worth a little degen play, and I never did it. And I've only got myself to blame, but it did run up to 0.4, and it's now back to 0.13. So yeah, definitely on the downward slope. But it's done 11,400 ETH volume. I mean, that's crazy for a free mint.
Royalty? Is it 5% royalties?
It's a 4.2% royalty, but I think I saw Punk 9059. What is it? NFT statistics from Proof on his daily videos said that the creator, as of 2 days ago, the creator had generated about 60 or 70 ETH because most of the trading that happened of the hours were at 0.5% because on Blur. But also OpenSea has still got their, I'm pretty sure OpenSea is still running with their policy where you choose to create a royalty, right?
Yeah.
So most people are choosing 0.5, especially for something like this.
But these things, though, they're like, sorry, Marco, you go. Yeah.
No, go for it. Go for it.
They're basically, these are just like, this is like speaks to a broader part of where the market is right now. And it's to do with Blur, that basically most of these projects are just shit coins, right? And so someone's like, oh, this owl mint, it has a good narrative. Like, let's pump that narrative into the community after we acquire a shitload of them, right? and that's what happens. Whether it's like the NFT Illuminati or like a couple of guys for a meme did that, and then it just gained traction. Like you never know how these things start, but once you start seeing in all the groups, then it's going to mint out. And once it's minted out, then everybody else wants to get in this FOMO and it's going through the roof, right? This is obviously an exceptional level of volume outside of the normal play there.
Do we know who's behind it? Is it anyone?
The guy who made it is called Ray. I think he's just some guy, like Ray Nicholas. I don't think he's anyone. But, the thing is, with a free mint that has a good narrative, you can do a lot of shenanigans with it. And again, it's like these certain alpha groups will call these projects after they've loaded up on it. And make they'll make way more than the guy who made the project, and then this, as you said, like in a week's time, this is going to be zero. This is going to go to nothing.
I'd like to sort of relate it to, because you said point one, Greg, was a friend of mine. Shout out to Ollie. He minted 10 checks, minted them, and they were basically free, right? They were $8, and he sold the 10 of them for point one, thinking he'd made 10x. Right, and he sold all 10 of them because thinking it was, again, one of just these basically free mints. Point one, I'm going to take my money and I'm going to put it into something I like. I didn't mint checks. I just saw it at remember the 11th of Jan, because I basically wasn't on crypto Twitter until then. But the second I saw it, I was like, I'd seen actually Jack's thread about it first, and I'd never heard about Jack. And Jack's been in the industry for a while, and it's the same conversation you and I, Greg, had in that pub that night, when they were at 2 ETH, and I was like, nah, the team behind this, they are incredible. Like Jaleel, the developer, is one of the best devs I've seen. Jack he's not a flash in the pan, right? He's been in the ecosystem now for a couple of years. I just love his transparency thread. And so for anyone that sees these random mints and stuff like that, I've been saying it for 2 years, go and see who's behind it, right? And if it's just one of these meme things, then it's most likely going to go nowhere. If it is a team that, has been around before and have done something before, or they haven't even minted before, but they've got some runs on the board. They're a really good designer, developer, or whatever else. Do that. But yeah, most of these, I think that the Owl guy no one knew who it was initially. So people are buying this and not even knowing who he is, which I guess people are doing it as well, maybe because it could be evil behind it. But like if you were ever going to just FOMO into these projects, just try and at least have a look to see who's behind it. Do your due diligence there.
Think it's wise advice. And if you're hearing Boot for the first time and talking about alpha groups and etc., Boot is deep in the underbelly of all the alpha groups of the NFT space. So make sure you follow his Twitter account at lowercase Boot, where you can not only get alpha, but you can also get tweets like water is wet, and you can see like avocado and Vegemite. So shout out to what's your handle, by the way, Marco? We should plug your handle.
Mine is the same as it's been since 2007, I think. Marca Media. Marca stands for Mark Anthony, my real name. So as a kid, my mum used to shout at the windows and embarrass the hell out of me. Mark Anthony, get home! And then as a lot of these things happen, right? Some things you're embarrassed about as a kid, later on in life you embrace. So it's Marca Media. We're planning to change it for a bit to do the whole maybe Marca_ETH. I also want to just get Marca. My tweet from last year was a suggestion to Elon when Twitter was going broke, was to auction off all inactive Twitter usernames and do it for crypto, and he would make billions. People would pay a lot of money for certain handles. I know Trev in the Bitcoin community, who's got TO as his handle. I'm at Marca Media at the moment.
Easy done. All right. So we've spoke about a lot about owls and birds and stuff like that. Let's actually speak about what was probably the most significant thing in the last week, outside of, big numbers and sales and things like that, was a new standard or a new way of wallet abstraction. There's a lot to unpack, but EIP-4337 that I believe was sort of revealed at ETH Denver, which was an event that seemed like it went off really, really well. Who wants to open up the floor on 4337?
Well,
yeah, I guess. Sorry, go for Boot.
I was going to say maybe you, Marco, because you have the developer background, and I'll give my layman's take afterwards.
Yeah. So first off, I guess always a bit of confusion between EIP and ERC. This has been a proposal that supposedly is around since almost the inception of Ethereum. I think Vitalik was part of the EIP, which is the Ethereum Improvement Proposal it stands for. It's been there for like 10 years, but an EIP means you need to have a hard fork of Ethereum. So we've seen the EIP, well, we're going to hopefully see the Shanghai fork coming soon for those staking. So they had always put it on the back burner because they didn't want to turn it into this big hard fork, which basically means, literally a fork in the road for Ethereum and all the rest. And then recently they looked at it and went, hey, instead of having it as an EIP, we can have it as an ERC. So we all know ERC 721, which is NFT. So it's a protocol. So they've been able to bring this out that they've spoken about for 10 years as an ERC, and it means it's not a hard fork. And what it is there's a really good quote here from John Rising, and it basically says it gives you the same features as a bank would without having to trust the bank. So the biggest issue with onboarding normies, as we call them, to this NFT and crypto space is the wallet setup. So you have to go. A lot of us will go into the browser, we'll download MetaMask, and then you're given this 12 or 24 phrase seed phrase that represents your private key. And then if you've got this 24-digit character, and you don't know what to do with it, right? And we all have different things, and if you lose that, you lose your wallet, you lose everything. So it's really weird, right? Whereas, and there's no protection, there's no fallbacks. If you for some reason that you write a piece of paper and someone gets that piece of paper, they've got access to your bank. So there's no protection, there's nothing at all there. You can't turn around to your friend and go, hey, can you help me here, whatever else. And that's one of the biggest issues. So 4337 will bring out a new type of account ownership. At the moment, I can just own my account, or there can be smart contracts accounts. This is more of a sort of interim one where you can have things like, hey, if I lose my seed phrase, I trust Greg and Boot to be able to give me access to it. So you get things like, almost like fallbacks and insurance and things like that. Then there's other things like gasless transactions. A big thing again with Ethereum is it sometimes can cost tens, if not hundreds of dollars to just do one transaction. This will take away, in some regards, gas transactions. The gas can almost be paid by the collection that you're working with. So that's quite an interesting thing. There's a whole plethora of things in there, and it really does seem to be a game changer for Ethereum. So,
yeah, from a UX perspective, and I'm glad that you went first because I would not nearly have been able to give an eloquent answer like that. But to my understanding is that it allows there to be smart contracts on the wallet itself, so that you can basically put a call function on there outside of having to use the wallet itself, right? So there's some redundancy built in there and protection for the wallet address itself, as opposed to having used a third party always. That's my kind of understanding of it. But I think from a UX perspective, being able to do that, it removes a lot of risk. You can have your ETH on there and you lose the seed phrase. And again, you have other third parties, which might be friends, which could be an institution, that are able to call the function to retrieve those, ERC20 tokens. It's just, it's the future. That had to happen, and it might not have made an impact yet, but when it does, it's removing the days of, well, you lost your wallet, you're screwed. It's done. Even the protection from basically scammers as well, I think it could put in there as well, in that almost everything is a semi-gnosis safe at this point, but that gnosis safe is controlled by multiple parties, and it's just done a different way. So I don't know. I think it's the impact hasn't been felt yet, but people building are definitely going to create some really interesting solutions, and it's a great UX onboard narrative for corporations, for maybe your parents, for just the average retail consumer that wants to get involved in cryptocurrency. So the solutions coming are going to really revolutionize the space based on that.
Yeah, I personally think this is incredibly significant. In very much layman's terms, I would say that this new EIP 4337 is the bumper rails, right? The 10-pin bowling analogy. We have just put bumper rails on the lanes, to help steer the average person in the right direction and to avoid some of the pitfalls that we know are barriers to onboarding new people to digital asset ownership. And I think this is really, really significant. Yeah. Similar to what Boots said, I don't think we'll see the direct benefits maybe for some time. But if we rewind the clock 6 months ago, or roughly 6 months ago, to when Ethereum moved from proof of work to proof of stake, that was almost a shining light in what was a really hellish back half of the year for crypto, right? And blockchain and sort of Web3 in general. And I think, from a corporate perspective and a brand perspective, it was always a barrier for them to consider Ethereum when it was proof of work, right? They knocked that barrier down. Yeah. Now the barrier was security. And, how do we make it friendly from a UX perspective? And, when everything's on the line, we're talking about big stakes here. So, or high stakes, I should say. So for a brand to, sit in a room and hear about, if you lose these 12 or 24 words, it's all over for your project and you've just lost all your funds and da-da-da-da-da. Like, putting these guardrails in place is just such an awesome move when I think about sort of adoption of brands and adoption of just your everyday person, right? Like when we look around, if we're having a drink with our friends and we look around, there's 10 people in the room, you go, well, how many right now would actually feel confident or even want to go down the path of trying to open up a wallet as it currently stands? And, my gut feel is maybe 2 to 3 at most. I think these new things that we've just spoke about in the last couple of minutes will really drive that number up to sort of probably above 50% in my opinion. So I think this is really, really significant, and I'm pumped for the Ethereum ecosystem that they just keep moving the chains forward as an NFL analogy there.
Yeah, and I think it's important to add though, like if you think about people's first interaction with the Ethereum network or with just cryptocurrency in general, I mean, not the Ethereum network, but with crypto in general, right? It's on a centralized exchange. So most people who hold crypto aren't doing it on chain. They're doing it in a centralized way. This provides a security in a decentralized way. I still think there's a large component of onboarding to get people into the decentralized kind of sphere. So like, it's not necessarily just going to transform things overnight, but it builds the infrastructure up for that to take place. But you still have to build the narrative of like why decentralization is safer than centralized exchanges. And I mean, we know that you put your money on an FTX, it goes up, everything goes up in smoke, etc. But the average consumer still doesn't know that. It's so much easier for them to just do it in that way. So I think that when something gets built out to the level of like a Binance, but is all fully decentralized using these kind of protocols, etc., then that's the coup de grace for kind of decentralization, and centralization is kind of dead in that area. But that state, it could be ages away. And it almost raises the question of like, does this new way of doing things kind of kill Ethereum's competitors in the long run if they don't adapt and do the same? That's a question mark that we don't know. I mean, it's pure speculation at this point.
And I think one thing which we maybe haven't mentioned is bundled transactions, right? So it means there's set rules in place that at the moment, and again, we're used to it, right? You'll go and you'll sign you'll sign into a website and then you'll sign the transaction. You might do 3 or 4 signatures, right? And you're like, and if you miss one, it could be whatever. So what this sounds like is almost like that one-click Amazon checkout process, right? That's the holy grail of it. And I think our friend Fultura said it, right? When people aren't buying NFTs, when they're buying NFTs without knowing it, that's when we're going to embrace everything. And this looks like it's going to do that. It's literally bundling up those transactions. So instead of going 4 or 5 times, and think about it, a normie to come and buy an NFT right now, look at all the steps they need to do, right? It's like 6 or 7 steps usually to do it, right? They got to go and get some cash on Binance, and then they got to send that, instead of a MetaMask, send that to MetaMask, then go somewhere. And we'll get to it later on, like with checkers, but then it's like the trust of the website. Like, do I just trust this random website that I'm going to buy something from? And that's where Manifold has really helped. So it sounds like you're getting close to that one-click checkout process for Amazon, which is only a good thing for the ecosystem.
Absolutely. And a tremendous segue. You should do podcasts more often, Marker, to our next topic on the agenda being Amazon. So there was an article that came out yesterday saying that Amazon is most likely going to be launching their own NFT marketplace on April 24th, American time. This, unfortunately, will only be available to US customers, at least in the beginning stages, but I'm sure it will be rolled out to other countries shortly after that. So there was sort of almost two schools of thought on Twitter after this, guys. One of it was all praise and here we go, here comes mass adoption, rah, 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 rah. The other one was, do you remember Coinbase NFT marketplace and what a flop that was? So there was varying views. My personal view is I think it's a good thing. Like, we don't know what NFT collections are coming on Amazon. I don't know if it's going to necessarily be, sort of the Coinbase route that sort of spent 12 months saying, hey, guess what? Pudgy penguins are going to be on Coinbase NFT, and this collection and that collection. Like, my gut feel is it'll probably be new collections. I don't know. I could be wrong on that one. Boot, do you have any thoughts on Amazon launching their own marketplace?
I mean, it depends on like what we think it's going to achieve, right? Like, if the Coinbase hopium narrative of like it's going to reinvigorate the NFT space, like, then no, that's not going to occur. But is it like long-term good that these brands are looking at building in the ecosystem? Yeah, it is. It's bullish on the technology, right? It's bullish on what it can achieve, and even if that's just dipping their toe in the water to do something small or making a larger brand play, I think it's only a net positive. But I'm very pessimistic about the PFP ecosystem and how it stands. Not pessimistic, but I'm skeptical, because I don't think that, we talk about mass adoption and, seamless integration of the tech into this stuff. And I'm like, well, when that occurs, why would people be buying these PFP projects? Because they don't need to. Like, there's surely other brands are going to enter the space and do their own product play, and they've already got to establish, I just don't think the road diverts back to us. So no matter how many of these big brands come in, I think the liquidity in the current ecosystem is going to stay limited. It might pop up in another bull run. Maybe it takes another 5 years to come back, kind of like DeFi, but like short-term bearish on that stuff. But, I'm very bullish on the more these corporations enter the space. I think Starbucks kind of set the precedent. I'm always harping on about Starbucks, but the fact that if one company comes in and does something, you might be like, oh, that's really stupid. Like, why do they need to do it? That's what we would think. But then the other brand who's like, well, Starbucks has done this, now we better do this because maybe there's something there. They surely know what they're talking about. They come in and do something, and then like it starts a snowball effect where suddenly all of these brands go, well, we better have a play in this tech space because there's something up there. And even if they just throw it out as marketing spend and don't try to get anything back, that was almost like enough of a snowball to build a narrative around it actually having value and being useful. So yeah, the more brands, the better is kind of like my take.
The one thing I would, I don't know if the word challenge is the right word, but I would push back a little bit on Boot, at least from my perspective, is, are we underestimating? Like, I agree with you on the brands, right? And I think that it's a huge benefit. Whether it's Amazon, Starbucks, like these big brands that are sort of essentially waving a flag saying we're going to come and join the fun. But are we underestimating the cultural aspect of, and I know it's very small, but almost like this new media attention that NFTs bring, right? And I agree with you that not all PFP projects, like we're seeing a huge amount die just this year in 2023. Lots of founders saying, we're checking out, we're leaving, et cetera, et cetera. But when I think about sort of almost a shift in media when we saw from, even content creators that could, burst onto the scene through YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or whatever, right? Like there's almost these brands and these individual brands that have been born out of technology and out of new ways to sort of garner attention. And are NFTs a new way to garner that attention, right? Like, so I suppose what I'm pushing back on is it going to be enticing for people to be joining in the fun of, what has been born out of the blockchain, opposed to just jumping into a brand that they already know that exists that is then coming in to sort of launch an NFT collection, which sometimes can feel a little bit extractive or can be a little bit on the nose for people, because it's almost like, oh, we know what you're doing, brand XYZ. Whereas some of these projects and some of these sort of attention grabbing PFPs or whatever it might be, like even the checkers game, right? They're sort of fun because they've been birthed out of like the blockchain. So I think, I don't know, I'm not fully convinced that everything goes away. I know that you didn't say that, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just sort of some of my own
Food
thoughts.
officially says NFTs are dead. That's on the record of the EIP Bird Show, right?
I looked into this yesterday because I use Amazon Web Services quite a bit. And I know they've got like a blockchain division and you can do certain things in there. They do like private blockchain. And I actually spoke to my friend that works at Amazon, but he didn't know anything about it really, but he was like, it's an Amazon.com thing. It's not a tech thing. So there was one article from Blockworks and they said that it will tie real world assets delivered to your doorstep to NFTs. So I don't think they're going to come in and just start doing PFP projects. I think, again, like the proof sort of discussion, is they need a point of difference. And, we've heard about NFTs tied to real world assets, this phygital term. So obviously they dominate. I pretty much buy everything now through Amazon. You almost don't look at anywhere else, right? Because I got a Prime account. So listen, if they can do this digital physical combination type thing and it works, then again, it could be huge. And Amazon are pretty smart, right? They've seen what Coinbase failed to do. And I think if they're going to come in, supposedly they've had this in the pipeline for a while, but the FTX thing delayed it, whatever else delayed it. So really interested to see what they do. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a bit longer because it's US only, which we see a lot with these initiatives. So.
Now, Marco, we don't beep anything out on this show, but what we need you to do, if you ever drop the word phygital again, is you need to say to our listeners, earmuffs, and then drop the word phygital, and then we can move on.
We're bridging the gap, though, guys. Yeah,
we are.
All right, so we've covered Amazon NFT Marketplace. We want to get on to both open edition projects, Checkers and Game Show, that both of you have been part of respectively in the last couple of weeks, and more broadly this open edition meta that we've seen that sort of Manifold's had a lot to do with as well, sort of the accessibility to be able to launch something pretty inexpensively and quickly without needing a lot of tech knowledge. But Marka, I mentioned this on the show last week, and if I don't get the numbers completely right here, just correct me, but 2 weekends ago, you launched a project called Checkers, which was somewhat of a derivative of Jack Butcher's Checks, which we've spoke about earlier on the show, for $6.90 USD. So a very inexpensive mint. And I believe that you minted out close to 7,000, and it really just caught fire. Talk us through, like, how long have you had this in the works? How long has it been churning through your brain? Where is it at? What was the whole premise behind it? And also congratulations, because, you were definitely the talk of the town 2 weekends ago.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Greg. I guess a bit of a background for me. I run a digital agency in real life. I used to do all of the development, the design, but the last sort of 5-10 years, I do more of the business development stuff. And getting into NFTs 2 years ago, I'd heard about Ethereum and smart contracts probably 5-6 years ago. And I was like, oh, that's code. I should look into that more. And I just didn't. Bought a little bit of Bitcoin and Ethereum like a lot of us did in 17, 18, and then just forgot about it. And so got in February two years ago. Unfortunately, I got into the VV ecosystem, which are those 3D sort of collectibles, and took me a little bit of time to get into Ethereum. And then when I did, now I'm basically an ETH maxi. And then for the last 2 years, I'm like, hey, I'm a developer. I should learn Solidity. But I just almost felt like, a bit of a imposter syndrome, because I'm like, I don't do development in real life. Fortunately enough, in 2001, I got involved in a couple of projects and I did websites for them, NFT projects, which was a lot of fun, but I still didn't do the smart contract or the Web3 sort of MetaMask connection. And then sort of 2 years went by and I still didn't do it. And I was really like, it became like a bit of a blocker for me. So this year was my goal. Like I had a plan, was like, stop degenning, stop wasting time on OpenSea and stuff, and actually try and build some stuff and just get that off my shoulder, right? So a few weeks ago, I launched on-chain NFT tickets for NFT Melbourne, which we're going to get to. And I almost felt like, okay, let's go. What am I going to do next? And we were going to use Manifold for that, but I wanted to do my own smart contract, my own everything. So I did that. And then in the meantime, I bought one check, original checks, and I've infatuated with the project ever since. And certain people told me not to sell it too, and I didn't. I did composite my one check over, and I happened to get a really rare one. So, and then the ecosystem is just, the community was fascinating and all the rest. And I'd done a couple of art derivatives like Checks Guevara, which is a really bad pun. And I was going to just mint something just for the laugh. And I was like, no, I'm not minting any of these because I'm not an artist, right? For those people who don't know, I'm sure it's mentioned, like Vincent Van Gogh is an artist.
Yep.
He minted out this Pepe derivative. It just looked like a Pepe made of checks. And he made how much? Like $2 million in 24 hours from it.
Yeah.
And that just spun off all these derivatives. Everyone's doing it in there. And so I was close to minting just something. I was like, no. And then I was just in the Discord and I was like, surely someone's done the game of checkers, right? As a derivative, because it's called checks. And, I don't know if I'd seen it at that time, but a guy did do Tetris, like Tetris, as a little game. No, I hadn't seen it at that stage. And then I was like, okay, I knew there was with NFTs, you can have, a lot of them are just images, as we call them, monkey JPEGs. But NFTs they're basically just a pointer to anywhere. So a lot of times it's, number one FT points to this image, number two token NFT points to this image. But you can also point to websites. You can have them as HTML interactive websites. And there's been some cool projects over the years that have done it. A couple of guys in Melbourne did everyday slots, where it was a slot that you could change what the slot were. But it was almost like some people didn't like it because the NFT changes, right? And what Jack has done after he originally minted that checks is all this refresh metadata. So Jack, even though they're just images, Jack kept on refreshing the metadata of checks, which a lot of people were like, oh my God, I didn't really know that. So I was like, hang on, people are now used to metadata changing. And I was like, yeah. Someone then responded in the Discord saying, I haven't seen it, but that's ingenious. And that was like Tuesday afternoon, I think. As you guys know, I was heading off that weekend to do a Spartan event up in the mountains. And so I basically the beautiful thing about coding, which I learned at an early age, was open source code libraries and sharing. And there was a bit of a checks demo out there, and I sort of got it. And then I was like, hang on, I'll change the pieces to look like a check. And then I did something, when checks was probably the first board game I learned, 30 plus years ago. I remember playing with my uncle. And when you get to the other side, you king a piece. So I made that look like Jack Butcher and stuff like that. And I was like, showed it to a couple of people, and they're like, this is pretty cool. I showed it to one guy, Romanak, who I think he had a few drinks in, but he was just like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And I was like, okay, I think I should just mint this. I think I should have a crack. And I'd sort of played around with Manifold, as I said, to maybe mint the NFT tickets for NFT Melbourne. And you can basically create a contract on there, and you can then have this claim page. So I pointed the NFT at actually IPFS, but basically a web page which had the interactive game, and it didn't work. I was like, oh darn, Manifold doesn't support for the claim page HTML NFTs. Richard.eth with an R, Richard with an E, sorry, .eth. He runs Manifold, and I remember Theo 2 years ago almost. Theo was like, Richard's a gun. He's involved in, what else was he involved in pre-Manifold? He was on-chain.
He ran a crypto gambling site in Malaysia. So West Coast NFT, for context, the founders of that were the previous founders with Richard, and he entered the space, started Manifold, and he started West Coast.
Yeah, but I went to DM him, and I thought I'd actually had DMs with him, but I hadn't. I've just had Twitter interactions with him, but I always knew he always responded straight away. So I DM'd him on Thursday night going, hey, Richard, you've got documentation here on how it should work, but it's not working. He goes, no, I'm pretty sure it does work. And I was like, no, it doesn't. And he goes, oh, you're right. So they had to basically turn it off because of security reasons. It's an iframe that sits, and an iframe could trigger a pop-up of a MetaMask. So he got onto me straight away, and he goes, Mark, by the time you launch the collection, we'll have it ready for you. And I was like, really? And so then Friday afternoon, before I was just heading to Bulbo, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready. Let's go. And honestly, I thought if I sold 50 of these sold, I'd be happy, right? Like, I just wanted to get this game out there. I used to play a lot of games as a kid. Gave it up, for a long time. Started playing Fortnite again during COVID and stuff. But, and we've all heard about Web3 games and play to earn. But, so I was like, let's go for it. So I left here at 10 p.m. on Friday night, and it just started minting. And I think 50 had sold, and I was like, brilliant. And Richard had really helped me out. And I was driving to Bulbo, and I got to Bulbo. I was in the car park of Bulbo at 2 a.m. I think 250 had minted out at that stage. And I was like, this is amazing. When I first heard about crypto back in the day, it was all about micropayments, right? It was all like, you can get these micropayments, and then it didn't really happen because of gas and whatever else. And then this was it. I had 250 rand micropayments of $6.90, relative. I went to bed. I finally got to sleep for a few hours, and then I remember Michael Keane from NFT Catcher had written in Discord. He was like, Mark's gonna wake up to a pretty crazy shock. I was 1,250 that morning had minted.
Wow.
And I was supposed to do a mini race that morning, but I had 4 hours sleep, and this was too exciting. And so over the next sort of 5 hours, it just went crazy. So the last 5 minutes, 1,100 of them minted. So it was 6,887 in total.
Wow.
And it just caught. I want to do a bit of a post review thread on it in terms of, hey, what were my learnings and how did this sort of happen? Now, listen, a lot of it is just timing and luck. A lot of it was, hey, I've been in the system for 2 years, and I've really tried to look at what's hot and time things and build up. I call it marketing, but not marketing in traditional sense. Marketing is going out and talking, making friends with you guys, talking to other communities. I'd really got into the Czech community. I did a logo for Black Czech DAO, and they'd taken that on. So some of the top Czech holders minted some of the first ones, and that just got the chain reaction going. And then Michael Keane was right. He was like, people look at what's minting on Manifold, and they'll just mint it because it's cheap and it's going there. So that was,
I was going to ask you, was there, you sort of obviously mentioned that the Czechs community was quite pivotal in sort of it catching fire, but was there any other catalyst for you? Like you're obviously tweeting it. I saw your thread explaining Checkers sort of got really good views, really good numbers, but was there any other catalysts or sort of significant retweets or significant sort of quote unquote influences that gave you a little bit of love?
I thought it might have been Jack maybe retweeted it, but Jack or Jaleel, none of them retweeted it. They all liked it, but none of them retweeted it. Obviously I got in terms of, I jumped on the bandwagon, the train, right? There was checks there. Yeah. If I just done this as a checkers game, and checks didn't exist, I don't think it would have went anywhere. So one thing is you do, and we've seen with NFTs, is you've got to get in on that meme, on that whatever is hot at that moment, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be derivative of something. You can just get in, like the owls, right? It wasn't a derivative of moonbirds. It just was somewhat connected.
To talk to that, to talk to the spread. So, because I remember you were telling me that you told us in the group chat that you were making this project, and you were like, this is coming up, and I was like, yep, looks really cool, looks really interesting. Just thinking I was going to come and mint it. But then I forgot about it. I could just forget about things. But then I went into my Discord that I'm part of, which Richard is part of, and he'd been posting about checkers. So I think that you having the conversation with him, because he likes to solve that problem, he bought it. Other people saw Richard buy it. He must have, and he was sharing it, saying this looks really cool. And I scrolled up and he shared it to these guys, and a couple of degens then started buying it. So you hit the narrative on the head in the correct way, and then you got the attention of somebody in the space who really liked what you did and thought it was awesome, and just started telling people.
Yeah, and I don't think I'd love to know if because he, as I said, I was sure I was in his DMs before, but there was no record of it unless it cleared off. But because I'd had that interaction with him over the 2 years, because I've had interaction with you guys, with other people, I wasn't again just a nobody. It was like what I said earlier on about who's the team. I'm not anyone famous, but I've, like you guys, lived and breathed this space for 2 years. So I think a lot of those initial buyers were people like, hey, I'm going to support Marco. Or a lot of them were also, hey, and I keep getting it. It was like, I didn't know you could have a game as an NFT. It was like a bit of innovation there. I was the first one on it, and Manifold as well. They've subsequently retweeted it. So there was a few firsts there, but there was also just, hey, there's a meme here. Let's run with it. And then you gotta market yourself. I went out there and I sent the link to you guys, to other people. I got in the Discords and the Twitters and did all that. I was literally, I was driving up Mount Baw, probably tweeting at the same time, sending it out to people. So listen, as I said, if 50 sold, I would have been stoked. If 100, 200 sold, and then just to see it go like that. And I've been involved in other projects. I worked on a project for a whole year last year, and it did mint in the end, but I sort of got out by it. So like this, it just proves, right? Like you have some wins, you have some losses. I think trusting yourself and then do what's your strength, right? Like I was trying to do an art review. I was like, I'm not an artist, right? Vincent van Gogh is an artist. He, again, had worked for years. So if you've got a strength, stick with it, like whether it's coding or design, or maybe your strength is marketing or, ideas. Like Michael Keane, again, he's got the most incredible ideas in the ecosystem. So double down on that and trust yourself.
So once again, congratulations. It's an amazing story. And to know that, someone in sort of our local ecosystem here in Melbourne and more broadly Australia has had such a great, phenomenal result. I think everyone was sort of cheering you on. But what sort of next from here, Marco, like as in for checkers, like you've mentioned game, and for those that maybe are not too aware of sort of how open editions can work and the flexibility that can bring, can you give us sort of like the TLDR of like how you think it will work and if there's any holders out there, like what's sort of next?
Definitely, yeah. Well, what the initial game was checkers. I actually then replaced, again, using Jack's refresh metadata, I replaced the first game with checks 4, which obviously is similar to, 4 in a row.
Yep.
Interesting little story there was Captain Cook was supposed to be addicted to it when he was traveling around the world down to Australia. It was called Captain's Mistress because he used to be down there playing it all the time. So it's been around a game for a long time, because you do need to be sensitive and careful of copyright and things like that. So I replaced the original game with the second game. Now, if you go to the NFT, you can choose to play either game, which is pretty cool. So it's 2 games for the price of 1. So utility, there you go. You paid $6.90 for 1, and I give you 2. And if you look at my Twitter, what I've then looked at is, again, as a kid, I spent a lot of my time in arcades. So I'm using this checkade sort of pun now, where I want to build up a library of games that people have access to. When you mint a project, and I think again with Jack, he minted his certain number, and if only 50 had sold, I would only be able to do a certain thing with that. But because there's 6,886 of them, I've got quite a good number there to go, okay, what do I want to do? And it could be, and I've hinted a lot at burning. Burning is sort of the thing at the moment, but it's quite tricky. Like, do you want to just burn your supply to nothing? I have thought about this battle royale style thing where maybe you play PFP. PFP is definitely coming. That's a no-brainer. So you'll be able to get on there and play each other. And is it maybe a battle royale where it's if you lose, your NFT disappears? Or maybe it's more like if you own a certain number of NFTs. What I thought again was this arcade style. And I remember there was an arcade in Dublin City. There was this second level, which was like for more of the adults, and maybe it's levels or like floors of an arcade, and there's more games on certain levels, and there's like the high rollers casino one where you need to have 20 of these tokens. So
just don't call it high rise.
Yeah, true. So the beauty of it is there's the check map or the road map is it's not set in stone. And again, I'm not trying to overpromise and say I'm going to do this and do that. For me, I just want to let people. I want to see people playing the game, and I've had people say, "Hey, I'm playing checkers with my son right now. I'm loving it," or "I've never played, this." And I was like, "That's so exciting to see." And um, again, not to blow my own trumpet, but we heard so much about these metaverses and these Web3 games, right, that made millions, and they produced nothing. And I'm like, well, I've produced a game, a playable
Yeah.
game. People are having fun. You paid your $6.90, which is basically almost free. And now it's like, okay, what can we do with it? And I really want the community to give me ideas. So yeah, it's interesting. And I think you have a bit of alpha because
Yeah, shall we? Let's see if this works, because I'm going to share my screen here. So if you're on the YouTube version, hang on, what's it saying? Browser needs screen sharing permission. Okay.
oh,
This
Greg.
is okay. I tell you what we might do, Marco.
I can share.
If you can, go ahead.
Yeah, I could probably share it. Let me just open it up because I hadn't got it open properly.
If not, we'll tweet it out from the Ape and Bird NFT
let me just
show
make sure
account.
I've got that. There we go. I've got it here, and I'll just go into.
So while you're doing that, Marco, Boot.
You see that?
Oh, here we go. We're bringing it up. So for those that are on the audio only version of the show, what we are viewing right now is could I describe it as somewhat of a Pac-Man sort of nostalgic vibe here, Marco?
Maybe, yes. No, definitely. There's Pac-Man was one of my favorite games as a kid, so there is a copyright around Pac-Man, so I need to be careful about what we put out there. But yeah, it's a bit of a concept. The check symbol looks a bit like the Pac-Man, and that's what I'm using for Check Aid. I think if you change something substantially enough, then it should be okay. So that's what I'm thinking. It's just these nostalgic games as we played as kids, bringing them in, and again, not trying to make it like floor price, right? And burn and tokenomics and all this stuff. Just letting people play first, and then maybe looking at sort of tokenomics and burn and whatever else. So
love it.
What I'm working on right now, which is quite technically difficult, is player versus player, right? So how do we do that? You'll connect with your wallet. If it's just free to play, it's fine. But if there is some sort of leaderboard, you need to look at it, right? We heard with Dookie Dash, people hacking it and stuff like that, which is the Yuga Labs game. So there's a lot of work ahead of me to get all that working. But yeah, I'm excited just to see people play it.
Amazing. All right. Well, if you are on the audio only, if you check that out around the 70-minute mark, you'll be able to see that. We'll probably tweet that out, I'd say, to Marco, if you want to, up to you. But we can tweet that out following the show. Boot, you also experimented with an open edition. It wasn't just you. I believe you were doing it with a couple of friends. But game show. Do you want to tell us a little bit about sort of that experiment over the last week or so?
Yeah. So, I mean, typically I was basically just doing the marketing on this project and helping that angle of it. It's actually the idea of Yellow, who's like a gigabrain trader who traded himself from zero to an ape in a bear market and has just been selling sewer passes now. I think he's made like maybe $500,000 in this year alone through trades, right? So gigabrain trader. And he had the idea of kind of doing a burn mechanic through Manifold as like a game show where there'd be kind of this coast and then you would win these kind of OEs if you successfully pass through the rounds and buying a ticket. So we put that out. I guess we were kind of tied to the schedule because he was overseas as well. So we kind of had to put it out a certain date, but was with artists that we're friends with. So it wasn't like, it's kind of just like, let's see if we can put something creative out there and have a go. Didn't do as many mints as Marcus project, but it still did 1,800 and people played it. They liked it. It's kind of cool to build out a concept where there's kind of a bit of game of skill, game of chance where you go through the rounds and you've got to, I don't want to say gamble because it's based in Australia. It's a game of skill and then based on your skill, you could win an OE. But again, the project is based in Canada. So obviously for legal reasons, just being careful with those comments.
Yeah, of course.
But like, anyway, so I guess the idea was really to go through and take, I guess, a different angle to the OE where you just kind of got all the same thing. And this was kind of like, well, yeah, you get variations of things and then you have to like burn it to get a different OE. So it's kind of, I guess, able to kind of uplift artists to be part of a bigger project had it have been super successful, I think that's kind of a good narrative. But I think in doing it, there's kind of a complicated UX piece around telling people how to, like, what to do with their ticket. Like, I think you said that to me, Greg. You're like, hey, what do I do with this ticket boot? And I'm like, wow, it's already passed. You needed to have done it in this time frame. You're like, oh, you rugged me. And it's like, well, to be fair, like, it is complicated to explain, right? Because if you think, and I think having experience with projects in the past that are much more streamlined, which is just like, you come into Discord and ask the question, and people still, like, you might have told them 50 times and they're like, well, what do I get with this? And like, they have no clue. And I'm like, all right, well, this is way more complicated than that. There's no Discord. It's only on Twitter. It's like, so yeah, I guess moving forward, if it's to take place again, which we're looking at doing it in a different way and building these game experiences around the open edition. And this is not about money. It's about just having fun, building stuff on chain. So we would do a much more streamlined UX component to it and make sure all the tweets explaining when the windows were up were there, and maybe even build in a basic Discord to kind of be like, okay, bang people over the head and be like, you need to do this now within this window, right? Because otherwise people will just miss out. And yeah, so it's complicated. But I think we were talking about the OE meta before, and I think, to be honest, like, mostly it's kind of dead for, like, if we think of it as like the artist OE, which is just, hey, my name's Nest Graphics. Haven't seen you all in a year. Here, please give me $2 million kind of thing. Like, that to me is dead. You know, like the Lambo kind of OE, but then OEs like Markers, where it's from creators who actually are involved in the ecosystem and building kind of cool and weird things. I think that meta is still around. Ours is kind of weird. Like, that's a meta as well, right? Like, free and weird. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. Like, there is no hard-coded kind of degen play other than stuff that would be traditionally interesting. This reminds me much more of, like, if these projects that have come out at the start of 21 or mid-2021, they would be like, oh man, OG crypto project with all this kind of cool stuff. People would have all bought it because it was back then. Now we've lost all these, like, shill influencers. Like, I don't even know where they are. They're not on Twitter anymore. They're gone.
They're at Ordinals. BTC.
They've gone on LinkedIn posting about AI being the new way forward, right? Is that?
Shout out to Ryan Carson, who's a big listener of the show.
I think.
Go ahead, Marco.
Give my input in terms of having lived it, right? I was like, I look at it and go, if I had done just a set amount, what would have happened, right? And if I had done a certain price, what would have happened? But again, looking back on those projects in 2001 and 2, they had some crazy mint prices. Like, look at Mechaverse, right? Or what happened, right? And they got all this money in, and then they had to deliver. And now it's, there's a lot of different open editions and different ways of doing it. But, I think it's nice that, projects are going, okay, well, I'm giving out this for free or for very cheap. And I guess once the popularity goes, like, if you'd sold 100,000 of them, say, Boot, you'd be like, oh my God, we've got this war chest, now we can go and do something. But you hadn't promised anything, and then it's like, okay, great. And it's like, I'm finding out with Checkers, it's like, this, no one can really FUD me because, hey, you paid $6.90. But now it's like, I don't have the pressure on me, whereas some of these other projects, they made all this money and crazy pressure to try and deliver. So I like it from that perspective. And then just, again, getting more NFTs in hands is I think, a good thing. There is a lot of the opposite, where it's just, there's a lot of crap just being minted and people are just buying, there's tens and thousands of them because they're free and they're just junk. Again, pros and cons to it, I think. But
it's a transition.
Do you want to?
Sorry, go on, Greg.
Sorry. I was just going to say, do you want to give as we wrap up the OE chat, but do you want to give Game Show's Twitter a little bit of a plug? What's the handle? Because you did have a couple of crafty little videos in the pre-promotion that maybe people would like to check out.
Yeah, at Game Show NFT. I mean, you won't be able to play now, but at least go and have a look at what was put up there. Because I guess, like, the thesis that we put forward in doing this creative stuff is, like, looking to do experience NFTs, which is just like, all right, how much does a movie ticket cost, right? And let's make it, like, I mean, not Australia, like, let's because that's a rip-off, right? But how much does an American movie ticket cost? Let's put it at that price. You can buy, you should be able to enter and actually have some fun with it. And it's not a shit coin. Like, there's no, like, it's not high capped in any supply. It shouldn't be flippable. And I know people, DGens hate that narrative, but I think that's fun. It's kind of like, I'm going to buy it. as you said, Marco, there's no expectations. I'm going to get some fun out of it. These are the clear promises made, nothing more than that. If something comes down the line from that, so be it. If there's another project that I get access to because of that, then so be it. But it's an experience, and it's like you don't see a movie and go, well, I saw fucking a movie last weekend. Where's my free movie? You're hanging out at the cinemas for like 6 months. Like when Moon with my ticket stub, right? So I think as soon as we start transitioning and thinking like that, we're going to get a more stable like kind of ecosystem.
And with all this blur shit as well, it's turned everything into trading and tokenomics. And it's like, hey, forgetting that this is an amazing canvas that we're all creating together, and there's the art and there's the music and there's the games and whatever else, and it just a lot of the times it comes down to just the tokenomics and the money, and it's really taken a lot of the joy out of it. So I think hopefully we're seeing more of this, and this bear market makes people like me build, right? Because when it's that bull market, you're so distracted and you're constantly FOMOing and go, oh, I missed out on that yesterday. So I think there's a lot of positives to this stage we're in the ecosystem.
Love it. All right, moving on from Open Edition and Checkers and Game Show, we'll wrap this up in sort of the next 5 to 10 minutes, but we do want to make a couple of notes of some significant sales and just a few other bits and pieces of news over the last sort of 5 to 7 days. So massive Fidenza sale a couple of days ago at 266 ETH. Also a Bored Ape Trippy with a crown. So Trippy fur with a crown sold yesterday for 440 ETH. So massive sale there. And shout out to the Bored Ape bot that continues to go. I don't know if it's the same one from back in the day that I used to always jump on and say free, but I got to say in a Twitter environment where a lot of words have been destroyed, Wagme over the journey, even GM gets done to death. I'm still a GM fan, but I still love jumping in on the Bored Ape. I still love jumping in on the Bored Ape bot and saying free. It brings me great pleasure. It is the infant in me, but I love that. Also wanted to shout out Claire Silva. I'm going to butcher the museum's name, so you guys jump in. But is it the Louvre? Is that how you say it?
Yes, in Paris,
okay.
the Louvre.
Yes, correct.
Sounds fancy. So Claire Silva, AI artist. If you don't know Claire's work, you definitely should. I know she was on the Proof podcast about a month or two ago, so go check that interview out. I'm hopefully doing an interview with her soon for Cointelegraph as well. Also, Mochaverse, Anna Mocha's mint. So we won't go into that, guys, given that we've sort of gone a little bit over already. But ultimately, Anna Mocha, that most people would know, headed up by Yatsu, have launched their own, I don't know what we would call it, Boot, but is it almost like a pass to future drops of the Anna Mocha verse? Is that how you would describe it?
Well, I mean, partially, I won't comment too much because I do work with Animoca brands in part of it. But and secondly, I don't know enough to comment like that well. But I think
I'm glad I threw to you.
They're trying to build out a brand play basically across all of their ecosystems, and I think they're trying to bring it together. Whether or not this does it, I'm not sure. But power to them and good luck. And nothing but positive things to say about Animoca. I think that they have put a lot of liquidity into the space and done some interesting things, and they're still here and they're still building, and you've got to be bullish on that.
Yeah, so floor's at 1.75 ETH right now, and I think they minted at something like 0.069. I think you could actually get 2 for around about 0.13 or something like that. I didn't mint. I sort of saw it out of the corner of my eye, but didn't mint on that. Also wanted to give Terrell Jones, so goes by the name or the handle on Twitter at Terrell Dom, so 2 R's, 2 L's, I should say. So Terrell, I've got an article coming out on Cointelegraph tomorrow with Terrell, and I wanted to give the Ape and Bird listeners a little bit of a sort of heads up. I mentioned this last week on the show, but one of the things, having been in the Proof ecosystem for the last 12 plus months, but now also writing and interviewing these artists, is we are sort of seeing some of these artists really explode. And I think Terrell is one of those. He was, again, recently on the Proof podcast doing a lot of media. He's been featured. He's got 2 pieces that are now featured at Sotheby's at auction. I personally just love his artwork. It's got this like nostalgic vibe to it. He uses a lot of devils in his artwork as well. So the reason I wanted to mention it, obviously that article coming out tomorrow, but he mentions 3 or 4 up and coming artists. And these are artists that have got sort of like around that 4,000-5,000 up to sort of 12,000-15,000 followers that you can sort of see similar to Terrell, who's approaching 40,000 followers. I remember stumbling on Terrell about 2 or 3 months ago, and he maybe had like 15,000, 20,000 followers. So these artists are just starting to gather momentum, and obviously nothing is financial advice on this show, but what I am saying to you is when you read these articles or when you hear artists talk about other upcoming artists, I mean, take it with a grain of salt as well, because some of them might be their direct friends, etc. But it can't hurt to check out their work, and if it resonates with you and you can get it for a cheap price, why not have a crack? Because if you like the art, you can always keep it. But if that artist does get momentum and goes on to really blow up, like Claire Silver's doing at the moment, like Terrell Jones is doing, you might have a nice win out of it. So just a little shout out to our Ape and Bird listeners. Also wanted to give some events. Obviously, we know Marker is co-founder of NFT Melbourne. I'll throw to you to say a few words about that in a second, Marker. But the date is Thursday, the 23rd of March. So that is NFT Melbourne in the CBD. Marker, how are ticket sales going? I believe you're onto your like final release. You've been getting some good momentum. You mentioned the NFT tickets as well, though people have got option to do a traditional ticket or a NFT ticket. Do you want to give us a little bit of update of how things are going 2 weeks out from NFT Melbourne?
Yeah, thanks for that, Greg. Shout out to you, because I remember jumping on and seeing NFT Fest online in 2001, right? No,
Yep.
2001.
September. Yep.
Yeah, and that was part of the impetus for Theo and I to set up NFT Melbourne, as well as just missing out on all those international events. So yeah, we had the first event last year, last February. It was pretty much the first event just a week after lockdown ended, that we'd all attended to, and we had 1,000 people. And it was a lot of fun. It was the height of the bull market pretty much as well. And so this year we're going again. The big thing for us this year is we really want people to interact with things. And yes, we love, some of the talks that you had at NFT Fest in November were awesome. We will definitely have some speakers and some talks, but we're really trying to make this interact the physical and the digital again. So we're doing physical tickets just through Eventbrite. We're on to, I think, the final release there. So things are going well there. Listen, as we keep hearing and talking about, 80-90% of people that we knew in this space aren't even in the space anymore. So ticket sales are definitely slower than previous years, but I'm actually really excited because I think everyone that there is going to be really into it, right? And a year ago we almost all didn't sort of know each other or whatever else, and now we're really good mates and we've really got a good connection there. So I'm excited, just like with NFT Fest, that all these genuine builders will come, and people and communities and all the rest. Plus we want to bring in the normies as well. So we should have a good mixture there. And then the NFT tickets, as I described earlier on, was it's something that we're still early. I 100%, if I had to bet on anything, is that NFT tickets are going to be here and be here forever, right? Like, could you imagine having your ticket stubs from, I remember seeing, Oasis and Prodigy when I was 17 down in Cork, and I got the train down with all my friends. Imagine I still had that ticket, on the blockchain, and even just having it would be great and visually seeing it, but the metadata of what date was it, where it was, but then also that ticket might have given me access to other stuff. I went and saw Prodigy and Flemington Racecourse, almost 20 years later, even if it was a discount or whatever. So yeah, really honored to have done some NFT tickets for that. So we've got 3 different rarities there, and we've got amazing utility. Theo's done a lot of spaces on it, and a lot of other projects are giving us goodies and access and stuff like that. So it's going to be super exciting, and we'll have things on the day in terms of if you own that ticket through token proof, you get access to certain areas and all the rest. And then we've got some incredible stuff. So we might have what we're calling a world first with Giant Swan, who you guys know is an incredible VR artist. And until you've actually experienced it, you won't really believe it. So we're trying to do pretty much a world first with him there. We've got a paint and sip with our friend Maddie Secure D as well. So yeah, it should be a really fun day. There's a few events on either side of it as well, on the Wednesday and the Friday, just like you had. Hopefully our after party isn't quite as late and as crazy as yours was, because I really struggled for that. So yeah, super excited to go again and bring everyone together and have some fun.
Love it. Well, Boot and I will definitely be there along with you, Marka. The website is nftmelbourne.xyz, where you can get your traditional tickets, or if you want to go the NFT ticket route, as Marka just spoke about, that option is on the website too. There is another event in Melbourne earlier in the week too, that I will be at. I mentioned it briefly last week. It's called CX3. So I believe, Boot, you might be there for that one too. Lisa Tay and Oscar Diaz running that event. So that website, I believe, is cx3conference.com.
Is it later in the week?
That's earlier. So you've got Monday the 20th. Did I stumble on my words there? Did I?
No.
So just for clarity, Monday the 20th of March, the website is cx3conference.com, and then Marka's event.
The Pullman Albert Park, right?
Yes.
That's
yeah. Marka's event, NFT Melbourne with Theo on Thursday, the 23rd of March, nftmelbourne.xyz. And while we're still on events, I will give a little quick shout out to VCon, Gary V's VCon as part of the Series 1 V Friends.
Who's Gary V?
I got airdropped 2 tickets today. The reason I wanted to bring this up was just the stark difference in floors. So last year, the tickets obviously still in a euphoric market with like ApeCoin had just happened, and we had Moonbirds coming up. We had Other Side. We had all these drops in sort of March and April last year. And VCon tickets were airdropped, and the floor, I'm pretty sure from memory, ran up pre-reveal to 2.4 ETH. So people were buying conference tickets at 2.4 ETH. Why ETH was probably still at around the 3,000 US range.
8,000 US.
Yeah, I gave one of my tickets to a mate that traveled with me, and that was fine. And but by the time the conference come along in sort of the third week of May, we had the lunar crash. We had sort of markets puking in general. And I think you could pick up a VCon ticket for 0.2 or 0.25. So
90%
people are probably not going to make the same mistake this time around. We are currently sitting at a floor of 0.25 after a few hours. And, it ran up, I think, maybe at 0.35, 0.35, I think is the highest we got. So I'll definitely be interested to see how cheap those tickets go to, because for a couple of $100, especially if you're in the US, you have to get flights like us flying from Australia. It's probably a pretty good deal, because VCon was amazing last year. But anyway, I'm currently still going, but we'll see, because proof of conference cancellation threw my plans a little bit.
That's right.
Spanner in the works a little bit, but more on that soon. Guys, one thing we didn't touch on today, but I think we might save it for another time, is Coinbase, announcing their layer 2. I think if we get into that, we'll go for another half an hour. So we might wrap it up, but really want to thank both of you. I know, Marka, we've actually got to jump on an NFT Melbourne Spaces soon, and we probably want to get a bit of dinner in before this as well. So thank you, both of you, for joining us on episode 29 of the Ape and Bird Show, and hopefully we can have you back on a future episode.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Greg. And just to reiterate, it's at @boot at Twitter. And what's yours, Marka? Just going to shill us at the end here.
I am at Marka Media, one word.
So, and my fantastic anon name at Greg Oakford. So you can find all three of us on the Twitter bot.
Based.
Okay. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone.